Good morning, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop preview for round 3 of this week's golf tournament. Gonna go through everything you guys need to know for today's action to go out there, build some GPP lineups, also go out there, try and target some value on Underdog and Prize Picks, as well as any of your questions down there in chat. So we'll talk about everything you want to today. That includes the PGA, LIV Golf, maybe even some Euro Golf stuff if you guys want to talk any action over there. And we got some other stuff going on today as well. We've got some college football, backyard brawl. If you guys are into some rivalry college football, I, of course, went to University of Pittsburgh. My mom went to West Virginia. So it's a little bit of a bigger day out there in the Gsluke household. A little bit of a financial wager going on between us two as well. And we also got UFC Noche on tonight, which is going to be a big one as well. So you already know I'm going out there and playing some DFS lineups over there. And we've got all this golf action to worry about too. So if you're a sports fan, it's a good day to be alive. It's always a good day to be alive over here. And never a better day for a DFS player as well. You got Karoom down there, says hardest working man in the business. I appreciate the kind words, man. Welcome on in and cheers to you. We got our coffee right here as well. What's going on? Good morning, Jeff Allen. To take a sip of coffee to say good morning to you. What's going on, Michael? He says you came second in the $1.20 max. Said thank you for that. First off, congratulations, Michael. And of course, I'm bringing you some of that content. And he said, for all the content, let's get the money today. Amen to that. Let's get after it. What's going on, Metro? What's going on, Soli? He says, let's have a day. Thank you for the content. Of course. What's going on? Says, good morning, Luke. The coffee is poured. Yeah, I'm not one for brewing my own coffee. I've got some Dunkin' here. I don't know. I'm a basic bitch, I guess, right? I like my Starbucks. I like my Dunkin' and don't like it myself. And yeah, Canelo fight too. You're 100% right. Speaking of, guys, I want to mention our presenting sponsor of this live stream, which of course are our friends over there at the Ship It Nation, and to build some of those lineups out there for UFC tonight. But you know where I'm getting my projections? Over there at the Ship It Nation. They are a great resource for all your needs on DFS, not just the golf stuff that we're talking up here or some of the NFL stuff that you'll see in some of my other pieces of content. Over there at the Ship It Nation, you can get all your projections for some of these more niche sports, especially if you're somebody that enjoys a variety of different sports and different types of exposure that you're getting to. You can see on there that they've got NFL that, of course, started a little bit over a week ago, PGA, MMA, NHL when that comes back around. You got MLB going on currently, as well as a few other sports that they cover over there at the Ship It Nation. So they're a great resource. They're not going to price gouge you out there in a membership. And if you use code Luke10, it'll give you a 10% off any membership over there. So it's a good little discount, good little kickback out here for the channel, helps support what we're doing here with these live streams, and a great crew and a great partner to have here at the channel. So make sure you check them out if you guys haven't already. But yeah, that's our presenting sponsor of the live stream. I do want to mention what we saw from the golf course in round 2, which based on what we saw in round 1 was pretty much the exact same scenario. So just to remind yourselves, round 1 was about a one-shot difference between the AM and the PM wave. Well, round 2 was about the same exact scenario. In fact, it was a little bit over a one-stroke difference between the two waves. Yesterday, I told you guys to go out there, play as many AM players as possible. In fact, my entire player pool out there for round 2 Showdown had that one-stroke advantage. So that was huge when it came to going out there and having a high ROI. And if we sort this by your ceiling scores, so let me go out there and actually show the waves on here too. You're going to see that there were some PM guys that popped off, most notably a Matt Kuchar, who still got to -8, Fishburne, Reeve, Thagala, etc., that got to a -6 or better. But if you count the scores that were -4 and then try and separate it by waves, it was over 60% of the guys came from the AM wave. So it was a one-stroke difference. You did have a few guys that snuck in there in the PM wave. But if you went out there, you took my advice out there for round 2, you probably felt pretty good about your ROI at the end of the day. You might not have taken down GPPs. You might not even have profited out there. But I can tell you at the very least, you probably came at least close to break even at the very worst yesterday. So I know we had somebody who came in second place in that $1.20 max. I personally had about a 5x ROI. And the reason why I point this out, guys, if you go to round 1, you'd see a lot of the same. If we take a look at the trends between the AM and the PM wave, it's a pretty carbon copy situation when it comes to the weather. So if we go over here to the HRRR model, bring it up over Silverado Resort and Spa, you'll see that as the day goes on, it's going to get a little bit warmer like we've seen for the first few days, which I actually think is advantageous for some of these players. but the wind gusts, particularly towards like 2 to 5 p.m. local time, which is going to be when your leaders are teeing off, some of your, guys towards the middle of tee times are finishing up their round, the wind kicks up to 9 to 12 miles an hour, which we've seen for the first few days. And I know that doesn't sound like a massive difference, but that led to a stroke difference yesterday. There wasn't that much wind out there in round 2, and then also nearly a stroke difference out there in round 1. So any sort of change in the weather is something that we're gonna have to keep an eye on, as it's had a massive impact on the scoring average so far. And you can see, just like we had for the first few days, that there is probably going to be an advantage. Now, the one little caveat or asterisk that we're going to want to put on this is that your better players are towards the top end of the board. The guys that are in form, the players that are playing the best golf, are going to be teeing off later. But I would be pretty shocked if we came back here for our round 4 live stream and there wasn't at least like maybe a 0.3 to 0.5 shot difference between the first and second half of tee times. Now, to circle back to the weather, I do think that there's like a specific set of tee times that are going to be the best. So they're starting a little bit later today. I believe it was 8:45 local time is the first tee time out here for round 3. I think that if you could start maybe an hour into the tee times, so maybe closer to like 10 a.m. local time over there, maybe even 10:30 would be like the perfect time to start. You'd be starting when it warms up a little bit. You can see by 11 a.m. local, it's 65 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not at its full temperature, but it's getting close to that 70-degree mark that we look for most tour events. And the winds, if you were to start around, let's say 10, maybe 10:30 local time, you're going to finish a majority of your rounds before the winds even start to kick up. So if you can get somebody that's going off early, but maybe not too early when it comes to those temperatures, and just, I guess, for transparency's sake, even if you are teeing off super early when it's going to be a little bit cooler, I would much rather have those players out there in no wind than the guys teeing off with higher temperatures and wind later on. The evidence for that, days 1 and 2, right? It's been cool days 1 and 2. You've had those lower winds in the morning, and it's played a shot easier. So I think if it was warm in the morning and you had the lower temperatures, that it'd only be a bigger difference, right? It may even be like a stroke and a half difference out there towards the AM wave. So that's not going to be the case for today, right? It is going to be relatively cool early on, but I'd still much rather have those sort of players than the ones that are going to be playing on a baked out golf course when it's going to be a little bit more blustery as well. So that's what I'll say about the weather. Just like days 1 and 2, I think there's going to be an edge out there for round 3. The question will be how much. I do think that the talent gap difference will make up for it a little bit, but still something that I'm going to lock into lineup. So let me bring up our DFS projections. We'll talk through some of my top options for today, as well as any of your player questions down there in chat. So if there's anyone that you want an ownership number on, you just want my take on in general, just let me know. And if it's a player pool question or trying to choose between a few options, just make sure you tell me what kind of contest that you're entering, right? Because my thought process between cash, GPP, single entries is going to change quite a bit. So yeah, if there's going to be any player questions or specifically whether I'm using them or want to use them or not, just let me know the format that you guys are thinking about. But let's catch up on chat. Let me get a sip of my coffee down here and see what we're doing. I got my Dunkin'. I'm a basic bitch. Yep. Michael says, had to set the alarm, couldn't miss the show. It's 5 a.m. for you, so you're a real sicko waking up at 5. Yeah, me waking up even at 8 a.m. like this is early for me. So I definitely had a few alarms, but the coffee wakes me up more than anything. What's going on? Gang Green says, thanks for all the content. 7X day for you. That's awesome to hear, and ship it all over the leaderboards. Yeah, I saw that, and I saw a few people that are part of my Patreon page and the Ship It page over there. A few people that we've got in both Discords that absolutely killed it. So that was awesome to see. And yeah, smash the like button, guys, if you haven't already. If you haven't already hit it, you're a little bit of a slap dick, I have to admit, if you haven't gone out there and hit it as soon as you got in here. But hey, we'll take the little reminder, take the hint, go out there and smash it, as Michael said. And let's keep this thing rolling. Is Kiefer too late of a start in terms of a weather edge? So let's look at the tee time. It's worth noting that in my player pool today, guys, I am going to have some mid-starters because they're starting a little bit later. And because the winds don't kick up till like 2, 3, I'm okay playing guys until about noon. Now, would I rather them start earlier? For sure. Like if you could give me an 8:45 a.m. starting time as opposed to a noon starting time, I'd rather have that. But in the case of like a Kiefer, for example, let me find his tee time on here. I'm on the other tab right now on the PGA site trying to figure out where he's at. So he's got a 3:10 starting time, right? So he's going off with Clanton, super late, one of the last few groups. If you're looking for a weather edge, he's going off too late. I would say my cutoff time for the quote-unquote weather edge would be about noon, maybe 12:30 p.m. He's way after that. So if you're trying to find the weather edge, he's going off too late. However, is he unusable in Showdown? Absolutely not. I showed you guys like Kuchar that went off yesterday out there in the bad wave. You had still 40% of those pot performances did come out of the wave that played a stroke harder. So I don't know if I would completely cross him out of your player pool just because of that tee time. But for me, it's hard to get to those sort of players unless I love their ball striking stats. So for example, Luke Clanton, you can see he's at the top end of my board, right? I'm still playing him. So obviously, if I'm playing Clanton, I think Kiefer could make the player poll as well with that tee time. The reason why I got to Clanton, and I'll just mention it right now, would be the fact that his ball striking stats are unbelievable to this point. In fact, his off the tee numbers are what we are used to seeing from Luke Clanton. I mean, if we just look at the form heading in, he's posting pretty much these kind of numbers. You can see he's gaining nearly a stroke per round off the tee, over a stroke per round when it comes to the approach play. And if we check up on his stats for this week so far, it's pretty much exactly that, as I said. So let's find them on here. He's gaining 1.99 shots gained approach per round. Sorry, that's actually just round 2. Let's look over rounds 1 and 2 and give you guys the stats. He's gaining over 2 strokes per round on approach, gaining off the tee, and he's only been about a neutral with the short game so far. So Luke Clanton, with pretty much just his approach play, has gotten himself to -6 in T22. If he has any sort of cooperation with the flat stick, and by cooperation, I mean like even just gaining a stroke or two out there in round 3, he's going to go nuclear low. That would be like a 7, maybe 8 under par round out there for Luke Clanton, and he could vault himself up towards that lead after today. So I think a player in general that is just a lot better than we really have given him credit for, and I think a lot of people have given him credit for. I think a lot of people thought that he was a bright up-and-coming talent when we saw him have some of those starts early in his career out here, but now that he's done it time and time again, we're getting to the point now with Clanton where we might just have to say that he's a stud. If he's going to play like this long term, and that's a huge if, because to hold this kind of form, sustain this kind of performance long term, is only what some of the world's best players are capable of. But he's done nothing to prove otherwise, that he's not one of those kind of players. And frankly, if he continues this, he's better than everyone else in this field. And I know that's a huge hot take because you've got guys like Max Homa, Sahith, President's Cup players, I mean, like Wyndham, right, that went out there and missed the cut. This kid might be better than all of those players long term. I mean, just based on what we've seen in the small sample size, I think it's safe to say that. So give me that ball striking. It's not just this week that he's gone out there and done it. He's done it every time that we've seen him. He's literally always ball stricken the ball off of it. He's always taken the rubber off the ball when we've seen him play. So 30% ownership, by the way, that's the one downside I would say with playing somebody up top, is that all these guys are going to be chalky. With Wyndham missing the cut, you already had a lack of players that were $9,000 plus, particularly in Showdown when the pricing is going to be even softer than what we have for main slate. But when you have a few guys that are chalk or towards the top end of the pricing miss the cut, you're going to get even more condensed ownership up here. So worth noting that guys like Corey Connors are also over 30%. I've got Sahith Theegala as the highest owned player on the slate. So up top, you can't really get cute with the ownership. There's not really that guy up here that you can take at sub 15% ownership. Even a Minwoo's pretty chalky. I've got Tom Hoagie close to about 30%. JJ Spawn, one of your chalkiest players on the slate, as you'd imagine, at that -10 score. Really the only spots to get some sort of leverage in this top tier range would be like a Brendan Todd, a Patrick Rogers, or maybe even a Keith Mitchell that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But even some of these lower owned options, like you see here with Keith, I've still got it 19.8%. So this is a common theme that you hear in my live streams. It's something that I do for a lot of my Showdown slates, or really just even DFS in general. When I'm going with my spend ups, my first, second, maybe even my third man into lineups, ownership's not a big thing for me. Most of my ownership, most of my leverage in game theory is going to be incorporated towards the middle to bottom end of the board. Main slate, maybe you can get a little bit more creative at times, try and find some leverage plays up there towards the top, but it's not always possible, just like what you had for this week with the lack of guys up top. Keith Mitchell, a player that I'm taking here at -5, just like you had with Clanton, he is hitting the rubber off the golf ball. So if we go down to his score, give you guys some of the shots gained metrics, he's gaining a stroke per round off the tee and a stroke per round out there on approach. Losing a little bit around the green, about a neutral out there with the putter, which in terms of his long-term baseline is about what you'd expect from a Keith Mitchell. He's a very streaky putter, capable of big gains with the putter, but also some of the, worst floor rounds that you'll see from anyone out there in tour, right? Losing like 3-4 strokes putting out there any given day. So the fact that he hasn't been horrible to this point on the greens is actually, I think, a piece of optimism, or, a sign of optimism to come out there for Keith Mitchell. And the ball striking stats, the more important thing the first 2 days, he's been one of the best players in the field with his shots gained to ball striking. So that's the kind of player that I want to try and incorporate into lineups when he's going to be average, if not slightly below average with the ownership, and hitting the ball better than a lot of his peers. Speaking of hitting the ball better than a lot of his peers, Mackenzie Hughes is my favorite play on the entire slate. And it's not because of the ownership. He's getting some ownership. Heck, even the tee time isn't that ideal. I'm going off at -7, actually starting even a little bit later than Luke Clanton. What I like about Mackenzie Hughes, and the reason why I'll play him with the slightly later tee time, is the fact that his ball striking stats are unbelievable so far. He's gaining just under a stroke per round off the tee per round, but he's gaining over 1.25 shots per round on approach per round. In fact, with his shots gained ball striking over the first few days, let's just sort it. Let me bring up the shots gained ball striking tab real quick. I believe he's top 10 in the field, might even be top 5 in terms of shots gained ball striking. So yeah, he's top 10 in shots gained ball striking per round. He's up there with Corey Connors in terms of how he's hitting it. Keith Mitchell, who we've already talked about. Some of your best players in the field, some of your guys up there in the top 3, top 5, he's hitting it just as well as them, and surprisingly only gaining about a half a stroke putting per round. So just like a Luke Clanton, to this point, just going out there, hitting a bunch of fairways, a bunch of greens. If anything, you'd expect Mackenzie Hughes to do it the exact opposite way. He's one of the best putters, one of the best short game players that we have on the PGA Tour. And normally that off the tee and approach play is what we're hoping can go out there and flip. He can continue to hit the ball well, which is something that is usually pretty consistent from round to round. Your golf swing, you can get into a groove with that. You can keep that going from day to day out there in tour. The putter, the short game, is what can be a little bit more variant, a little bit more fleeting out there for these tour players. If he can get back to his baseline of gaining strokes putting and hit the ball like he is so far, then watch out. Mackenzie Hughes could be one of the best plays out here for round 3. Moving down a little bit further, I guess just to point out some chalk here, JJ Spawn would be your highest owned player down there towards the bottom end of the 9s, or I guess top end to the 8K range, however you want to look at that one. Chan Kim's getting some ownership, but outside of that, the ownership in this 8K range or top end of the 7s is a little bit lower owned just because of how top heavy the board is. With all these guys at like -7, -10 towards the top end of the board, I've got a lot of ownership condensing on this 9K plus range. So the byproduct of that is that this range is maybe a little bit lower owned than it should be, and it gives you a few really good leverage options. You've got a Johnny Vegas going out early. You've got an Adam Svensson here at -4 that also has relatively early tee time. A Neil Shipley at -3 that's going to be relatively low owned that I think should all be in consideration out there for your round 3 lineup. So if you're looking for a weather edge, this is a good spot to try and find some of those players, particularly if you want like a -3, a -4 starter, that's going to be going off in the first hour or 2 of tee time. So the ownership is going to be pretty attractive on some of these players, especially compared to, the 25% that you have on a Mackenzie Hughes. For example, Neil Shipley is right around the 10% ownership mark. So 2.5 times lower owned. These are the kind of guys that I'm starting to incorporate into lineups to go out there and get my differentiation, to go out there, try and get some uniqueness, some leverage out there to the field. Because up top, I've already mentioned that I'm okay taking on that ownership, but at some point we are going to have to get different. And, this 8K and below range is usually when I start to do so. See if there's any questions about the guys up top. If not, we're going to move down to the 7Ks. Where are we at? So when we get to the 7Ks, can we talk about Hoffman as a viable GPP option? So yeah, let's do it right now. So with a Charlie Hoffman, you usually want to play him when he's hitting the ball well. This is what I'll say about Charlie Hoffman. He's a streaky player. He can carry his form pretty consistently from day to day. And so far, he's losing off the tee, which is not ideal, but that is the only category that he's losing in. The other 3 shots gained categories, which would be approach around the green and putting, he's a slight gainer to the field. The one thing I'll say is that he's gaining a stroke and a half per round short game, which I don't know if we can really rely on from Charlie Hoffman. He's not the best short game player, admittedly, out there on the PGA Tour. He is gaining just under a stroke per round approach, though. So I wouldn't say that he's unviable, but I also wouldn't say that he's one of the better plays per the stats. The stats have him as probably an average play at best, probably due for some short game regression, which is not the best case scenario out here for our round 3 play. Let's see, the off the tee regression, though. He should get a little better off the tee. If he's better off the tee and he hits the ball like he did the first few days, he'll be fine because he'll go out there, he'll gain ball striking, and that's probably at least like a 2, maybe 3 under par round. If he can go out there and do that, the issue is the short game and whether he's going to have a little bit of a stinker day with that after having such solid success the first 2. I just worry about that with Hoffman because he's not the best short game player. Couple days of being just outside cash in. Let's ride up on today. Always appreciate it, of course. And hey, if you're getting close, you're on the right track. So keep at it, man. Clanton has been on a heater for a long time. Yeah, I don't even know if we can call it a heater at this point because I think he's just a stud. By the way, he's from down here in South Florida. I've played golf with Luke a few times. I don't know him very well or anything like that. I've just played with him with a few acquaintances. But a couple of my good friends are like really good buddies with Luke Clanton. And they're telling me that he's like the most intense kid that you can possibly imagine. I've never played any money games against him, but they've told me that like he's the biggest competitor that you can possibly think of when it comes to that format. And that one of my buddies beat him the last time they played. So Clanton's a stud and whatnot, but I play with some studs too, that's for sure. I lose my money almost every time I play with the guys I go out with. I've got my brother who hits the ball 310 carry off the tee. He hits it about 330, 340 off the tee. And then I play with 2 college golfers, one of which is a +6 handicap, who's the one that beat Luke Clanton. So that's why I'm getting better at golf, because I have to be, or else I'll lose all my money to those guys. He said, love your stuff. Appreciate that, Norm. Thank you for the kind words. You're a night shifter, so having this stream during your last hour is awesome. Hey, that's good timing, man. Glad to have you here this morning. Cheers to that. Thoughts on Suh or Pearson Cootie? Okay, I do have thoughts on those too. So let's go through them. If we're going through some of the options, and yeah, it's a good thing to point whether you want them in like GPPs or cash, because the context would help quite a bit. But if we're going to give you the shots gained metrics, I went through the 2 yesterday trying to find if they would be plays or not. And both are actually hitting the ball pretty well. So Justin Suh is gaining on approach. He's about an average player off the tee so far, but he's also an average player with the putter so far. And if you know anything about Justin Suh, he's kind of the opposite of a Charlie Hoffman. He's not usually very good on approach or off the tee. And he's normally one of the best putters on the PGA Tour. So if you're kind of like a Mackenzie Hughes, you're telling me that Justin Suh's hitting the ball well, but he's not making putts. And I'll tell you that that's bizarre world, and that's going to change at some point. So continue to hit the ball like you are, Justin Suh. Make a few putts like, I mean, you should be. You're one of the best putters that we have out here, and book it, right? That'd be super low round. So I love Suh. And then the other one was Pearson Cootie, right? So Cootie's also hitting the ball well, if my memory serves me correctly, but we'll bring it up just to confirm. Yeah, he's gaining 0.66 shots gained off the tee per round and gaining exactly 1 stroke approach per round over the first few days. So yeah, ball striker, he's losing with the approach, the putting so far. Those are the kind of guys I like. Players that are due for some putting regression, that are going out there hitting the ball well. So whether it's cash or GPP, I guess I'll mention that. I think that both are decent plays. But yeah, as Karoom said, the context would help quite a bit. Because like cash, I don't know if I would trust them because they're a little bit volatile, both players. Both aren't known for being rather consistent, making a bunch of cuts out there on the PGA Tour. But for GPPs or even single entries, I think they fit that build quite well. All right, let's keep moving down the board. So we talked about Hughes. Let's go to Andrew Putnam now. So Andrew Putnam is -4. He's got a relatively early tee time, which is one of the bigger things I'm looking for in my plays down low. He's only 7.2% ownership. And just like the last few guys that we talked about, Putnam is really hitting the ball well. So let me go bring up the shots gained metrics. He's gaining 0.88 shots gained off the tee per round, which is much better than what he's used to. Not always the best off the tee player. He's getting 1.15 shots gained approach per round. So that is just under 2 shots gained to ball striking per round, which again, about top 10, top 12 out there in the field in the category. And he's losing putting, which isn't all that atypical for Putnam. He's a very streaky putter, but when he gets that thing rolling, he can be one of the better putters that we have out here in the field. So just like some of the other guys that we've talked about, you give me an early tee time or low ownership, and then those kind of ball striking stats, and I'm going to be a huge buyer, especially at sub 10%. I've also got a Joel Damon in there. He's got a relatively early tee time, but he's maybe going off a little bit later than somebody like an Andrew Putnam. He's still sub 10% owned. And what I like about Joel Damon is the kind of momentum that he has heading into today, which after his round 1 performance and then blunder out of the gates in round 2, he had a legit chance to go out there and miss the cut. But on his back nine, he ended up shooting 3 under par. That was the harder side of the golf course too out there for round 2. And heading into today, he's even par, right? He didn't have a sexy score out there for round 2. He's also going to tee off a little bit earlier because he didn't have the best day. And what I really like about Joel Dahmen is the ball striking stats, even in the rough play, weren't that bad. They were a lot better than a lot of people would expect. And the ownership now is going to be a lot lower. So round 2 Showdown, he was a little bit chalkier than I would have liked out there for lineups. Round 3, though, I don't think we're going to have that same problem. A lot of because of how he started his round. Also, like a Chesson Hadley at $7,100. He's 2.8% owned, so he's going to be sub 5%, which is pretty rare out here on a slate for Saturday and Sunday. And what I like about Chesson's the tee time, also the fact that he's a very good putter of the golf ball. If we need somebody to get hot, try to go out there, gain 3, maybe 4 strokes putting in a given day. Chesson Hadley's the kind of player that's capable of doing that. So, and just to look at some of the shots gained metrics so far, he's been really good with the flat stick over the first few rounds. And in particular, in round 2, he did exactly what we were looking for. He gained 3 strokes putting in round 2. Round 1 also gained 2 strokes putting. He's been horrible with the ball striking, especially round 1. He was not his best out there with the approach play, yet still went out there and made a bunch of birdies on the round. In fact, if we go to his round 1 score, round 1, he only had 1 birdie. Round 2, though, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 birdies on the day. So that hot putter can be volatile. If he doesn't have the ball striking, it could be a little bit of rough sledding for Chesson, but we're looking for ceiling performances, and this is more of a GPP play than anything. You're not really using a Chesson Hadley out there in a cash or a single entry kind of format. And the last player I want to point out here would be Kevin Doherty down here at -3. He's got one of the earliest tee times imaginable with the -3 score, hardly even made the cut out here to get to Saturday. He's only 3% owned, and what I like about Doherty is he's flushing it off the tee. He's hitting a lot of fairways, and he's one of the longest players in this field. And kind of like a Luke Clanton, that's how you can go out there and make 7, 8 birdies. If you're hitting driver well and you're hitting it in the short stuff, you're going to have wedge over and over again, particularly on that back nine, whether it's on those par 5s going out there and reaching them into, or some of the shorter par 4s that are only about 350 yards. If you're a player like Doherty and you're dialed in with that accuracy, then you're going to have 80 to 100-yard wedge shots for pretty much the entire round. So these sort of players are the guys that I'd rather take in my lineups than the chalky David Lipsky's down low, right? Who's like -12 and flushing it all over the place, but he's going to be like 10% owned. Like he's going to be 3, 4 times higher owned than a Doherty. I'd much rather take a shot on somebody going off early that's going to be much lower owned that has, in my opinion, the same kind of upside. Like a David Lipsky long-term is a worse player than a Kevin Doherty. David Lipsky, by the way, is having like one of his worst years ever on the PGA Tour. Now, could he go out there and win? Sure, right? Davis Riley went out there and somehow won over 4 rounds at the Charles Schwab. We've had some crazy winners that have just like out of nowhere gone out there and popped off. That could happen, yes. It's happened a few times this year, so let's not completely dismiss the idea. But we've had far more people out there in that situation go out there and crumble when they've gone out there and had a lead or been towards the lead after the first 2 days. So give me some of that leverage down low, especially when the weather is going to favor those kind of players. And it's not just the Doherty that could make sense. There are other options down here I think that you could mix in. Personally, my favorite would be Doherty because of the off-the-tee stats, but you know, if you want to look at some approach poppers down there, you can go out there and do so as well. In fact, let me bring up the data golf sheet. We'll just show you guys some of those approach poppers and give you an idea for who you could take down there in the 6K range. So let's get the Chesson stuff out of there. Let's sort it by event average and go to approach. So if you're looking for some early starters, some guys are going to be a lot cheaper. A Brandt Snedeker, I guess, would be an option, but it's worth noting that he's had a really rough year. So he might be due to come down to earth a little bit. There's the Joel Dahmen play I was talking about before. So obviously that's why we're getting to him in a few lineups. But a Ches Reavie is super cheap. A Nick Hardy is relatively cheap. A Blaine Hale Jr. is somebody that you could use that's going off relatively early. A Tom Whitney. There's the Hughes that we already talked about a little bit before. But you can see here, there's not a ton of guys that are flushing it with the irons down low, but you have a few options to go through. Like there's the Justin Suh play that we were talking about. There's Charlie Hoffman, and somebody was asking about before too. But like a Joe Highsmith, he's down there in that 6K range. You could take him, and he's hitting his irons well over the first few days. Whatever your process is, personally, this off the tee, let's find Kevin Doherty, right? There's Kevin Doherty and his off the tee stats that I were mentioning. Whatever the case may be, just have a process for finding some of your diamonds in the rough And that's where you should really be going after that leverage and that weather edge. So that's what I'm doing down low. That's my strategy out there for large field GPPs. And now let's build a lineup or two together to get some lineup thoughts and my thought process when going out there and making some lineups. Where are we at? Shout out to your boy Eric Cole. You still hate him. You can see that on 18. Yeah, dude. I just honestly wanted to forget about that. So we're going to flush that down the toilet as fast as humanly possible. Not only did he miss the cut out there for GPP lineups, he screwed up my top 10, top 20 bets. I also had a bet on him to shoot -2 or better. All we had to do was shoot even par or better out there in the last hole, and he would have shot -2. A lot of things that went wrong on 18 for Eric Cole. Yeah, like I said, I want to forget about that as fast as humanly possible because that was the worst beat I've ever had in my life. Like literally, I've done a bunch of sports my entire life. I've done golf shit. I've done NFL shit my entire life. It's the worst beat that I've ever had. Hitting a 50-yard drive sideways off of 18, I don't even do that anymore. And I'm a clumsy fuck that plays golf once every 2 weeks, once a week at best, right? And I don't hit that shot anymore. If you haven't seen the shot tracker, look it up yourself. What Eric Cole did on 18 is inexplicable without a video. And I haven't seen a video to this point. And like I said, yeah, I know you're not hating. You said you will like. I'm just saying I don't want to think about it anymore because it's like, it's so confusing. How does he do that, right? Like, I don't know, as you can't tell, I crashed out over that shit last night. I screamed a few F-bombs. I'm sure my neighbors heard it. And honestly, I was just confused. It's like, how do you do that? How do you hit a drive 20 yards off the tee and sideways? Like that is, like I said, if there was a video, I'd feel much better about it because at least I know how it would happen. But I'll just show you guys because we're on the topic. I was hoping no one would bring it up because I knew it was going to make me crash out as soon as somebody said it. But look at this shit. Let's find Eric Cole, who, by the way, missed the cut on the number because of this. That's the worst part about it. Look at his drive here on 18. How is this humanly possible? How? Eric, what happened here, bud? Like, look, guys, this is a par 5, right? And just for like the perspective here, right? Here are the other two guys in his group. There's Matt Neesmith, by the way. He's +9. He sucked dick this week, right? He hit the pretty good drive out there in his last hole. How did Eric do that? Like, we have a rule in my group. You do that kind of thing, you take your dick out, right? Walking down the box. If you don't get it past the women's tees, that's the rule, right? You take your dick out and you walk down the box. They better have been chirping Eric Cole. That's all I got to say about that. Yeah, it was. I thought it was a glitch too, Phil, especially when they said that he had a penalty drop. So this first drop over here, you can see I guess he took TIO relief. As crazy as that is, he took TIO relief from this hole over here off his tee shot. They actually had this as a penalty. So I was like, oh, maybe it's a mistake and they'll fix it to where like he's out here like in the trees or something where he could easily have still made par, by the way. If he hit it in these trees over here, you lay up, you make par easy, right? But no, he actually hit it 30 yards. So yeah, that's enough for that. I did enough crashing out over that. Dude, last night, I was more than tilted about that. Yeah, and there's no video, I don't think, because I was looking for it. Don't get me wrong. I was looking for it because I was like, was it on purpose? Did he break his driver? So my first question is, did he break his driver? Is that how he hit it sideways? And then the other question is, if he didn't break his driver, that means he hit it off the hosel, right? Because you can't toe bang it 30 yards to the left. The only way to make a golf ball physically go 20 yards that far to the left is to hit it off the hosel, like, and make it go sideways, right? Which, by the way, with a driver, I've never done that in my life. Like, I've hit slices all my life. I've never hit that shank in my life, and I've hit plenty of shanks. Yeah, I know a lot of people had him, Phil. Trust me. He was chalky this week, right? He was towards the top, so a lot of people are going to have him. All right, let's build a lineup or two together. That's enough of that. I knew somebody was going to mention it, so I guess we made it this far without having to crash out over Eric Cole. But let's talk about how we build a few of our lineups. So you're going to likely have to take a mid to later starter towards the top end of the board. And I guess it's worth noting that if you were going to try and play a weather edge, the only way to really do so with all 6 spots would be to leave a bunch of salary on the table or to build like the most balanced lineup in human history. So I'm not necessarily against that, by the way. So if you were to do that, it would probably look something like this. Like, Maybe you throw in a Patrick Rogers or something like that. But the only way to get 6 guys that are all starting like the first 2 hours of tee times would be to start with like these, 8K players, maybe top end of the 7K range, or to leave a bunch of salary on the table. So, you could still start with like a Keith Mitchell and that kind of lineup. But, you could be a little bit more free with the salary if you're going to leave that salary on the table. Like you could go down here and throw a Putnam into that kind of build. You could throw a Doug Gim there at -4 out there into that kind of lineup. What I prefer, though, is to have a little bit more leniency when it comes to my tee times, right? Like that's why I'm still playing a Luke Clanton. That's going off a little bit later. That's why I'm still mixing in a few of these other guys, like a Mackenzie Hughes, for example. That's going off in a little bit later in the day, because you saw a few of them still pop off out there in round 2, right? Just to remind you, if you're just joining us, yeah, we're on the round 2 scoring right here. And we sort this, right? Matt Kuchar came out of the bad wave. Fishburne did, also Tway, Thagala, and Chez Reavie. So, and especially because the top end of the board are now the guys that have been in the best form over the first few rounds, you're going to want to have a few of these guys out there in your lineup. So that's where I think you could do it, right? That's where you could start with like a Luke Clanton as opposed to going that far down the board. We could start Clanton, maybe go Hughes as our second man in. I don't hate the idea at all of using like a Neil Shipley here. I think that he's in a great spot, especially when it comes to the ownership out there in large field GPPs. Let's throw a Vegas in there, maybe even a Patrick Rogers at $8,700. And in this kind of lineup, we've got leverage with Shipley. We've got some leverage out there with Vegas. I'd probably want to make sure my last guy in here would be at most like 5% owned. So that would take guys like Tway, Sig off the table for me, as they're going to be a little bit chalkier. So if I was going to round out this kind of lineup, it would probably be with a guy like an Aaron Baddeley. I could go with the Skins, I guess, maybe even a Lanto Griffin. That's going to be lower owned. But I would want to take a little bit of a step down when it comes to the ownership, because even with like a Shipley, he's still like 10%. Same thing with like a Johnny Vegas. Like he's a little bit lower owned, but he's still about 10% owned. We didn't have anyone in this lineup so far that's going to be sub 5%. So to have one of those guys would probably be a good idea. So that's what I would say about your large field GPP lineups, is that especially if you're entering like the big 25 or big $5 contest, your last man in should probably be a sub 5%er. Unless you have another sub 5% or somebody else. And because of the ownership and because of how condensed it is, you're probably not going to have that towards the top end of the board. So down low with one of your last 2 spots is the best spot to go out there and do so. All right, let's talk about some prop stuff now. So let me bring up we'll start with Underdog, I guess. I do want to bring up hopefully you can hear me now. My mic unplugged for a second. I only think it was a second, though, so hopefully we're good on the viewership and whatnot. But let's bring up these stat averages. So you can see I've got them up there for the PGA, LIV, and the DP World Tour. So we're going to talk through a few of the different events here at the same time. So PGA stuff was very similar to round 1. It got a little bit easier, as you would expect with some of the pin locations. Pins for round 2 were very favorable, I would say, out there compared to days 1 and 2. So you can see the birdie average went up a little bit, went up about 0.3 per round compared to round 1. Bogey average went down about 0.2 per round. So that was the real big difference in scoring. Scoring went from, I believe it was about like 0.6 under par to about a stroke under par. And that was where the difference came from. A little bit of an uptick in birdie average, a little bit of a downtick when it came to the bogey or worse average. Fairways actually went up, which I don't really know the reasoning for that, but it's normally about 6.5 per round. So round 1, it was 6.25. Today, it was 6.75. So maybe that's just variance, noise, whatever you want to call it. But it did slightly go up compared to round 1. And then the green and regulation average also slightly went up. I would attribute most of this to the fact that the pin locations were a little bit softer, but the greens could have also been slightly more receptive. I would, again, attribute that a little bit more to the pin locations than the receptiveness of the golf course. But I guess that would be open to interpretation. I could be very wrong about that. Your LIV Golf stuff, played 1 over par, 2.93 birdie average. We'll talk about this towards the end of our prop section, but it should play a lot easier than it did in round 1. We'll talk about why when we get to that later. Weather forecast looks a lot different than what it was for yesterday. And then the DP World Tour stuff, I guess they're already playing, so this one doesn't really matter. But yeah, stroke average was 1.5 over par yesterday, and they're playing right now, so I guess we could double check on that. Let me bring up let's see. We're all good now. Good. I hate when that happens because I don't get like a real notification that my mic unplugs. I have to actually like click on my streaming software to see that happens. And usually I catch it pretty quickly because I try and like see if there's any comments down there in chat, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So let's go through some of this stuff. So we're going to start with the PGA side over here on Underdog. And there's already a bunch of props that I've taken. So you can see that Mackenzie Hughes one was something that I'm looking at. I haven't quite entered that prop quite yet, but let's go with the two that I've actually gone with. So it's a Luke Clanton under on strokes. And then who was the one I faded? I think it was Lipsky. Yeah. Where are you at, David Lipsky? Did I already go past you? You're hiding on here, huh? There he is. Okay. David Lipsky for an under on his birdies and a 1.1x. These actually haven't bumped at all yet, which is fantastic out there from the content side of things. It's an under on David Lipsky birdies, especially if the birdie average is only going to be like the 4.18 that you saw from round 2. And I think with the easy pins that we saw yesterday, I think today they're going to be the same, if not maybe slightly easier. So let's give the birdie average like 4.2, maybe 4.25 per round. Lipsky would still be a great under at that kind of number. He's at best an average birdie maker in this field. More realistically, Lipsky is a well below average birdie maker out there in this kind of field. He's had one of the worst seasons of anyone that's even teeing it up this week. In fact, he was borderline even getting into this kind of field. So at 4.5 birdies, and we're getting a boosted payout towards the under. I mean, I'll take that all day, especially when we're also having under on strokes. We can use the boost up that payout even more. And you can see there with Luke Clanton, I'm taking his under on strokes. I love him for DFS because of how well he's hitting the ball over the first few days. But with some moving day pins, I think he can really get after it. So the first few days, he's gone out there. He shot -2 first day, -4 yesterday. And that was despite a few really big scores. He had a whiff yesterday, literally a missed shot out there in round 2. Round 1, he had, I believe, a similar situation where he had a double bogey from greenside in 2. And he had like a very simple chip to go out there and make a par. He duffed one into the rough, ended up hitting his second chip way past the hole and making a double bogey. So he's still scoring despite making a lot of dumb mistakes. If he can clean up that, aspect of his game, not go out there and have a double bogey on his scorecard, he's going to get, he's just going to shoot better, more efficient score. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Everyone would guess that based on not going out there and making double bogeys. But he can shoot like -7, -8 if he goes out there and has that kind of day. So I like that for Clanton. If you can't tell, I think that he's going to have a very good day. And hits the ball a country mile. So I don't know how you would want to root against him. Let me bring up Prize Picks now. The reason why I don't bring up the Prize Picks tab before we talk about it is if I bring up the tab and then don't go to it, I guess they think you're a bot because you have it in the background or something, or like maybe you're scraping data from the site or something is what they're assuming if you have it up in the background. So as long as I bring it up, like just when we're talking about it, we can actually bring up the board. So I believe they had like Lipsky at 4.5. So if you wanted to take his under, I guess you could at that sort of projection. Worth noting, Patton Kizzire got bumped down to 4 birdies over here in Prize Picks. He was at 4.5 last night. And Patton Kizzire, let me actually bring out the PGA site for you guys. I was considering taking a Patton Kizzire under on Prize Picks. Actually, sorry, it was on Underdog that I was considering taking it. Main reason being that he's at 4.5 and he has that same multiplier as what you have on Lipsky. So, we took that Lipsky under. I was trying to boost up the payout a little bit. I was looking at doing that with Kizzire, and here's the reason why I didn't. And I didn't know this until I looked it up because I haven't had to look up Kizzire stats really the entire year. But look at where Kizzire is on the birdie or better leaderboard. And I didn't know this. Number 30 on the PGA Tour. Now, I didn't mean to click that and bring it out of the way, but he's number 30 on the PGA Tour when it comes to the category. That's up there with a Justin Thomas, a Davis Thompson who won this year. That is better than Rory McIlroy when it comes to his birdie or better percentage. So I don't know if I would like that under as much, right? That's why I didn't take it over here in this Underdog slip. And on Prize Picks, now he's down at 4. So if anything, the reason why I guess I point this out is Lipsky should definitely be down in 4. If I go out there and show you his average, which I don't think it's horrible. His bogey avoidance is really bad out there for David Lipsky. But let's see where his birdie percentage is. Number 156 on the PGA Tour, which, like I said, is actually a little bit better than his bogey avoidance. Bogey avoidance, he's literally maybe the worst that we have out there in the PGA Tour. He's number 156 in the category. If number 156 was at 4.5 birdies and now number 30 got bumped down to 4, this should also be down at 4 birdies. So that's also why I like it under with the 1.1x multiplier. And Luke Clanton, I believe, is at 69.5. So yeah, he's at 69.5 here on Prize Picks. So you could take that same combination over here on this side, but you're going to get a less payout, right? This is only a 3x payout. Over here in Underdog, it's a 3.5x payout. So always try and find the best payout available when you guys can on these props. In terms of what I would take over here in Prize Picks, though, let's see what we've got, what we can cook with, because they've definitely bumped the board a little bit. I want to see what our options are before we get moving on this. So you've got some slappies here at 4.5 birdies that are definitely catching my eye. So I know we talked about the Lipsky one and whatnot, but like a Rafael Campos could be in play. And let me see where he's at on the leaderboard here for birdie or better percentage, because I don't think it's very good. But I could be wrong. Could be surprised like what we had with Kazire. So yeah, he's number 104 in the PGA Tour in that category, which is, I believe, right about the tour average. So now he could be an under that you could look at. I know Chan Kim makes a bunch of birdies. I know Patrick Rogers makes more than you would expect. And look, they have Neil Shipley at 5 birdies. Now, I wouldn't bet against him because I think he's going to have a good day, especially with that early tee time. But they've definitely gone a little bit overboard with some of this pricing. Like it's just far too optimistic on a few of these players. Let's look at the stroke stuff now. So they've got guys like Sahith at 69 strokes. Mackenzie Hughes is at 69.5. So you may have seen me considering looking at this Mackenzie Hughes under on 70 before, which I may still end up entering. The reason for that is because it's 0.5 lower over here on Prize Picks. And if you weren't here for the fantasy section, Mackenzie Hughes is playing some of the best golf of anyone in the field. He's gaining off the tee, he's gaining on approach. Hasn't even been his best self with the putter so far. He's normally one of the best putters out there in the world. So I think he sets up really well from the stat standpoint. So I guess to go back to Underdog, we can throw that into our shopping cart. And then that under on Kazire, if they bumped that down to 4, and now we're getting like a 1.1x multiplier you'd get for fading it. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to get to this 2-man slip, but this is highly in consideration, to say the very least. Also worth noting, let me see if they still have this other prop where it was before. I at least want to throw it out there because I was considering taking this just so that we have some extra exposure to give you here in the live stream. But I was considering taking this over at 1.5 bogeys for Minwoo Lee. I guess you guys can let me know your thoughts on these 3 down in the chat, as I'm still pretty close to 50-50 on whether I want to take these 3. But in terms of value, I think it's pretty obvious that they'd be value. Like Kazire's 0.5 lower and you get the multiplier. Minwoo Lee, for example, yesterday they had some props on Caesars for bogeys or worse. And they had guys at 1.5, like a Sahith. I think even Wyndham Clark was at 1.5 bogeys. And they were like minus 175, minus 190 towards the over. So just like you had some value with this Pan Kazire, you would have to think that most guys should probably be at a 2 bogey projection. And you get a 1.1x multiplier there. And then if you take this Hughes one as a positive stance play, you can see the payout would be 7x on that. So let me see if Caesars has posted any odds. We had no sportsbook odds to look at last night. None of the big 3 posted. DraftKings, FanDuel, or Caesars, none of them had odds up. Caesars does have some stuff posted now. I guess I should have checked when I woke up. I woke up a little bit close to the start of the live stream, so I didn't have as much time as what I was hoping for before we went live right here. But let me see if we have anything on FanDuel either. We do. Look at that. We actually have odds to compare to. Round 2, they didn't give us shit out here on these kind of sites, but now we actually have odds to compare to. So we've got that, and let's do DraftKings now as well. Sportsbook, please. All right, let me see if I can get to load. If I do this when I'm sharing my screen, just like the Prize Pick stuff, sometimes it fucks up. Doesn't like to work. Come on, man. Come on, bring up the golf shit. All right, so we don't have anything on DraftKings. I was trying to get it to load, but there was nothing to load apparently. But yeah, FanDuel and Caesars, we have some stuff to compare to. So let's look at the birdies or better board real quick. So they've got guys like Fishburne at close to even money. Sahith's at 5.5. He is juiced a little bit under, but that makes sense. I agree with that. Let's look at this. Patton Kazire, minus 165 towards the under. Okay, well, that's definitely value. What I want to look at now is I want to look at those bogey props, right? I mentioned that they had guys at like 1.5 and they were juiced over, but like, look at this. So they have slappies up here, right? Like Patton Kazire's at 2.5 and he's juiced over. They have Sahith Theegala, who's a stud by all accounts, right? But he's at 2.5 bogeys. If they were at 1.5, they would for sure be juiced towards the over. All right, we're going to take this. My MO for today is we had a bunch of really bad beats yesterday, and I heard one of the announcers on golf talking about like how caddies have to like not be scared in giving advice, right? Not be scared of being wrong is what they said. And after the Eric Cole thing happened, I was really fucking tilted. I was like, this is bullshit. Like, why do these bad breaks happen? Whatnot? You know, you've all been there as a bettor, right? You've had some bad break happen. I'm not going to be scared. I'm not going to be scared of being wrong on these three. They're all free value. I can tell you definitively, right? If you look at the sportsbook odds, they're value. And by principle, the props that I'm going to get to. So I'm actually going to enter them over here on my other account real quick, where I can enter them for more than $5. You see on the live stream right there. And yeah, it's over a 7x payout for a 3-man slip. So that's part of the reason to get to this, right? With those multipliers is you're not only getting props that I think are value to hit, but also a really, really good payout on that combination. So you guys can see the props on the board that we're taking over here on the side. I'm just doing it myself if you're wondering why you're not seeing any movement over there, so that I can lock these in. So yeah, over on bogeys for Minwoo, and then Mackenzie Hughes, under on strokes. All right, yeah, 7.28x. It's a pretty sweet payout if you ask me. And let's go with a pretty good unit size on it too. Why not? So I feel pretty good about that. Okay, so yeah, lower Kazire birdies, higher birdies on Minwoo, and under on strokes for Mackenzie Hughes. So yeah, that'll be another slip over there on Underdog, I guess. Let's try and find something on Prize Picks now, because I know some of you guys are Prize Picks only sort of players. If I was going to enter on Prize Picks, I wish they had some of the other categories posted. So like greens regulation, all that kind of stuff. But what we have on Prize Picks that we don't have over here in Underdog are slapdicks to bet against. Like we've got Kazire, we've got Lipsky over here in Underdog, right? That's pretty much it for the slapdick kind of players. Over here on Prize Picks, we've got a wide variety of the slapdicks that we can bet against. So I already mentioned Campos. We could look at a Kevin Tway fade. Speaking of, what is Tway's birdie or better percentage? Oh, I guess, yeah, he's not even technically a PGA Tour player this year. So I think Kevin Tway would be a prime candidate to go out there and be a fade. But who else could be mixed in? Like these guys at 5, by the way, they probably should be 0.5 lower. But I do like Neil Shipley today. I do like Thor Bjornsson, who's one of my outright bets. So I might avoid fading those kind of options. But like a Kevin Tway, who's going off late, he's got a 150 local PM tee time. Might not be the worst option for this. So I'm going to look at the shots gained metrics too. Let's see how he's playing over the first few rounds. He's carrying himself with the putter. Oh, yeah, this is the easiest fade ever. Yeah, like he's gone over the first few days, but it's been all because of the putter. Look at this, 3.4 shots gained putting per round. Okay, so as I was saying over here in Prize Picks, though, what we can do that we don't have over here in Underdog, and it's like the perfect segue now, is we've got these LIV Golf props that we can take. So going over to the weather, let's check up on that now. So for the LIV Golf stuff, they're in Bolingbrook, Illinois, which I honestly don't know where the golf course is. I guess we can try and find it on here. It's not a big deal, right? The forecast is going to be the same a mile across the board. I guess maybe it's not going to be exactly the same, but you get the point, right? We're in the same city that this golf course is in. It might be over here. Is that it? I couldn't care enough to go out there and actually find the golf course. But if we go down here to the HRRR model, you'll see that there's not much wind in the forecast, right? It's sub 7 miles an hour of sustained wind. They're starting around noon local time. I believe it's a 12:15 start. If not, it's a 1:15 local start over there in Chicago. Round 1, if you guys were watching the LIV Golf, they were getting blown off the golf course. Like it was 25, maybe 30 mile an hour wind gusts. The sustained winds were at least 15 miles an hour out there. And that's why the scoring average was 1 over par. And I can't give away the Data Golf projections, but looking over at the Data Golf site, they've got the projected scoring average for today at minus 0.8 strokes. So they've got it well under par, a huge difference compared to what we had out there in round 1. So though you may click on the scoring average here, right, see 1 over par and think it's going to play hard, I think it's going to play significantly easier out there for today's action, I guess, out there in round 2. So when we're looking at the Prize Picks board over here, it's a par 71, by the way, out there with the setup. Let me just confirm that because we've got 3 events going on. It's par 70, actually. Sorry, par 70 out there. You have some guys down here like a Mark Leishman at 71 strokes. that are projected at a +1 average, right? Like a 71 is a +1 score. Now, if I think it's going to play easier because the winds are a lot lower out there in Bolingbrook, Illinois, and it might even play even par, maybe slightly under par, Leishman would make a ton of sense to go out there and play. And I'll show you why right now. So he didn't have his best stuff out there round one. I think that's why the projection is so low. But look at his shots gained metrics heading into this event. Gaining 2 strokes per round, actually almost 3 strokes per round out there at the Greenbrier. Gaining strokes at United Kingdom, almost 2 strokes per round at Andalusia. Gaining slightly at Nashville, but that's still fine, right? He was better than your average player at LIV Nashville. Did lose at Houston, but it was just a slight loss, but then nearly gained 3 strokes per round. Gained over a stroke per round. Gained well over 2.5 strokes per round. He's been unbelievable recently. Like he's had one of his best stretches of golf, right? Top 5 finish, top 10 finish, second place, right? Top 5 he had down there at LIV Miami. This is the sort of player that's no longer sloppy, right? He's playing much more consistent golf. If you've been paying attention to LIV, you know this. You've seen him in contention in the last few weeks. And what we get over here in Prize Picks is if you combine the 2 sports, you can get a 3x payout. Now, we did have 1 positive stance play in Leishman, mixed in with 1 fade out there with Kevin Tway, which if it was the same sport would be a 3x anyways, but it's not like there's any sort of correlation between these 2 events. So that's why you get the 3x payout. You know, this could be an over, right? It would still be that 3x payout, but I like both of these props considering each golf tournament situation. And just in general, I haven't played all by LIV Golf action yet. Yeah, start time, by the way, is 1:15 p.m., not 12:15 over there for LIV, is I think there's some unders that could be some value because if it's going to be a lot calmer, that's exactly what it looks like over here in the forecast, the scoring average could be around a 70 average. It could be about even par. And guys like a Richard Bland are much better than average players. So like you can consider taking him out there in some of your lineups. What else? Like a Paul Casey is a much, much better than average player. Even a Burmester you could consider taking as well. Like these sort of players, I think would be very viable and probably going to get played in a few lineups or slips, I should say, out there in my exposure today. So that's what I'll say about the LIV Golf side. I don't think they have any props posted over here on Underdog, but let me see. Maybe they added a board since last night. See, so nothing yet. They still have it over there in the black. But yeah, over here on Prize Picks, you can find some of that exposure over there on my Patreon. But that's all I've got here for this live stream right now. We're going to catch up down in chat. I know we had a question about the pit game, so I'll touch on that here in a second. But if you guys want all the different prop exposure that I'm taking, make sure to check out the Patreon page. I'm posting all the slips that I'm taking for Euro Golf, LIV, and PGA over there, as well as the different prop sheets that you saw as well. Or DFS sheet, I should say, not prop sheet. Sorry, I don't know what I'm saying here. Early in the morning. Got to get a sip of coffee, I guess, here. But for the DFS sheet, and you guys saw it there for the DFS section, make sure to check out the Patreon page too. So yeah, pick QB over 272.5. I don't know about that. 272.5 is a pretty high line, right? Is that over here on Prize Picks? Let's see. They start at 330, so let's go down to that. There's Garrett Green. Ugh. Leads the Hicks out there. Freaking WVU. Oh. All right. Eric Holstein. Yeah. 272.5. What is this? His Goblin Line's 250. I don't know about that. So here's the issue with Pitt, right? Pitt's not a very good team. I'll tell you, I went to Pitt, right? I'm very honest about the teams that I went to. I guess a lot of people are playing that because you can see it. That's freaking on fire, right? 5 people have played it. 5,000 people have played it. The issue with Pitt's offense is that they'd like to be running heavy if they can. Pat Narduzzi is not a very passing heavy sort of coordinator or coach. He's the sort of guy out there that will like just run the ball 30 times in a game. And this guy Holstein, he's been completely carried by Daz Reed. If you don't know who Reed is, you'll know after today, especially if he has a big game against WVU. But he's maybe the best running back in all of college football, at least in terms of like a agility back, a fast scat back, you could say, out there in college football. He's unbelievably quick. He looks like he's probably going to be an NFL sort of talent. He's had like a 70-yard touchdown the first few weeks. He's caught screen passes for 40, 50 yards, I believe, on top of that out there the first few weeks. So I think him alone, and he's a running back, by the way. They use him at wide receiver too sometimes. He's like alone got him like over 100 yards both weeks. That combined with the running backs going out there and taking some screens, I'm just not so sure that he's got like a sustainable way to get to 300 yards or 275. Like you need him to go over this. unless it's a super high scoring game, which it might be. It's the backyard brawl. It's probably Pitt's biggest game of the year, in terms of like trying to find a rivalry game that might not be like a bowl game later on. I don't know. That's the one argument for it, right? Is that's the backyard brawl, should be close. Last time these two teams played, it was high scoring and a close game. But if that doesn't happen, he's probably going under, is what I'll say, because it's going to be highly game script dependent to go over that sort of line. Just knowing what Pat Narduzzi does with the offense, he's like Mike Tomlin. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's something in the water up there in Pittsburgh. They like to run the damn football, and they like to do it often. That's for damn sure. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got out there for this live stream. Is your Sloan outright looking good? Probably not, no, with him starting so far back. But best of luck to you, Phil, and best of luck to everyone out there with your round 3 exposure, whether it's for DFS or over there on the prop side. Hopefully you guys go out there and have a successful day and are ready to get after it for the rest of the sports going on as well. Whether you're watching some college football, maybe it's the UFC Noche card later on tonight. A lot to be excited for. And round 4, also around the corner as well. So for that, we'll have a live stream going as well. Will probably be another morning live stream with all the sports that we've got going on tonight, and the fact that they're not finishing the round until like 10 p.m. over here on the East Coast. So expect another morning live stream out there for round 4. But as I said, best of luck. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Check out the Patreon page if you want all the slips that I'm entering, that prop sheet that I was mentioning before, and let's get after it.